I've never hidden the fact that I love Star Trek Discovery Season 1. Despite the divisiveness of Disco's first season, I found it to be a nuanced look at Star Trek's ideals, especially through the theme of how flawed human beings can learn from their mistakes and still work towards creating an optimistic future. Certainly, Discovery's freshman outing wasn't without its missteps, but it's certainly not alone in that regard, even within the Trek franchise.
Count to 4, Almarine, then 3 more.
But as a whole, I think Star Trek Discovery Season 1 soars more times than it stumbles. And part of the reason I think Discovery Season 1 works so well is because of Captain Gabriel Lorca. Lorca presented a unique challenge to Star Trek viewers, old and new. He was dark, mysterious, and often made choices that seemed to go against everything a good Starfleet captain should be.
Shall we proceed to our radar?
There is no we, Mudd. You sold us out. You stay.
You can't be serious.
Oh, but I can.
Yet that was part of the point. We were never supposed to view his actions as heroic or acceptable. He represented a foil for the values that we hold dear in Star Trek. By embodying their opposite, he set into relief what really should matter in a leader. When it was revealed that Lorca was actually from the Mirror Universe, it made perfect sense. It allowed us to understand why Lorca was the way he was, and also reaffirmed what we had felt all along, that Lorca didn't belong in the canon of good Starfleet captains. He was a wonderful encapsulation of all the themes that Discovery wrestled with throughout its entire first season. Now, all that being said, Lorca also succumbs to what I think is perhaps Discovery Season 1's biggest writing failing, and it's one honestly that really disappoints and bugs me to this day, especially as I go through a rewatch of Season 1 during the wait between episodes of Discovery Season 2. And that issue is, why did Lorca turn out to be so goddamn over-the-top evil? Okay. So I know that Lorca being evil was part of the whole point of his character, but stick with me here for a moment. At every point after Lorca is revealed to be from the Mirror Universe, he reverts to an almost mustache-twirling evil cartoon of what could have been a really complex character. And not only does it go against the characterization of Lorca up until that point, but against the very themes that Discovery so wonderfully encapsulated elsewhere. One of the larger themes of Discovery Season 1 is characters learning to overcome their flaws and fears, particularly fear of difference and the unknown, in order to reaffirm their commitment of building a world based on unity and optimism. Michael Burnham starts off the series by acting on her fear of the Klingons, but comes full circle at the end of the series by refusing to act on Starfleet's fear of the Klingons, and instead reaffirms Starfleet's ideals of hope and mercy.
A year ago, I stood alone. I believed that our survival was more important than our principles. I was wrong. Do we need a mutiny today? To prove who we are.
Saru overcomes his innate fear of death to instead willingly place himself in harm's way for others. Tilly learns to trust her own decisions enough to join the command training program. Even guest stars get similar arcs, with L'Rell learning to stop hiding in the shadows and become a leader in order to fight for the unity of the Klingon people.
It's time for you to leave the shadows.
All of these characters learned and grew as the season went on, which is why I found Lorca to be a particularly glaring failure in terms of writing. Despite coming from the Mirror Universe, Lorca spent at least several months pretending to be a Starfleet captain. We see that he knows what the Federation stands for, even if he himself doesn't always represent it or believe it.
And we must win the war. But that's just the beginning. Imagine the possibilities. We're not creating a new way to kill. We are creating a new way to fly.
Yet, when he unmasks himself as truly being from the Mirror Universe, it's as if that entire experience went out the window. He just reverts to the exact same person he was before he ever found himself pretending to be a Starfleet captain. He even ends up saying stuff like this.
I've watched for years. You let alien races spill over the borders, flourish in our backyard, and have the gall to incite rebellion. Terrans need a leader who will preserve our way of life, our race. A future where we together will make the Empire glorious again.
And that doesn't feel believable to me. How can he really truly believe something like that after working on the Discovery crew? For example, he clearly has a deep respect for Saru. He even says as much.
Mr. Saru, it's good to see you. I'm glad I got a chance to say goodbye to you and the rest of the crew. I want you to know that my admiration for you was and is sincere.
That's a drastic change in someone who comes from a universe where Kelpians are literally enslaved and eaten. But do we ever see Lorca deal with the inherent contradiction presented by his opposing respect for Saru's leadership abilities and his belief that Terrans are the only species worthy of ruling? Nope, nothing, nada. I'm not saying that Lorca should have done a complete 180 and become the perfect Starfleet captain. Indeed, he could have gone the other way. He could have doubled down on his evilldom. Just as watching Lorca's actions reaffirmed how we felt about Federation ideals of respect for diversity, Lorca's time in our universe could have reaffirmed his belief in Terran supremacy. He could have easily argued something like, oh well, if you just did things my way, you wouldn't ever have had to deal with the Klingon War. Or we could have seen him at least have some misgivings about some of his actions, like maybe deciding to save Stamets, or maybe going against some of his former crew members' ideas, and being like, no, maybe we should start respecting people like Saru or the Kelpians. Maybe he would go to literally free the Kelpian race, and a bunch of his crew would be like, no, why would you do that? That's insane. It would make sense for his character because of his respect for Saru, but would also represent a cool contradiction against who he was supposed to be up until that point. But nope. He doesn't learn to be more merciful. He doesn't even learn to hate Federation ideals. No, instead, he just becomes the exact same person we kind of figured he was before he left the Mirror Universe at all. We never see Lorca wrestle with any real character issues after that point. He's just used to give us an admittedly cool, action-packed episode, but an episode that never really tackles the issues it so easily could have delved into. It's honestly just disappointing, especially considering that Discovery actually pulled this off well elsewhere in the series. While we could argue that the Klingon War storyline was also wrapped up a bit too quickly at the end of Discovery Season 1, it at least felt thematically resolved and gave every character a chance to complete their arcs. We could argue whether or not certain parts of the Klingon arc were effective, but at least it felt complete.
Casting the light so we may see our path to lasting peace.
But by not giving Lorca a chance to finish his own arc, and instead just have him become a simple villain lacking in any nuance, it cheapens his entire character development up until that point. It makes him a simple plot device rather than a character, and ultimately makes the entire Mirror Universe story feel unresolved when compared to the thematic completeness that the Klingon arc gave us. Lorca was easily one of the most standout characters of Season 1, which is really saying something when you have a show crammed full of amazing actors and characters. So it honestly just really bugs me that this series cheapened his entire story and character by doing such a disservice to him right when they were about to cross the narrative finish line. That's everything I had for this episode. I just really had to get that off my chest. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please consider checking out my channel, where I do other videos on Star Trek analysis and themes, as well as other dives into different fandoms as well, and even LGBTQ education, as I'm part of the LGBTQ community. If any of that sounds appealing to you, please consider giving my channel a subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. And until next time, live long and prosper.